How's it going, History 1110 students? Now, hopefully week one went well. If it did not, please let me know if you got lost or confused. I am here to help. As always, that's my job as a professor. I love teaching. I love being a part of education. So please feel free to reach out. Now, if you reach out and you need me exactly like I need you now, email me in multiple locations. Like I said, I work at the middle school as well, so I'm all over the place. And that does not mean I'm ignoring you or anything. I do get back as soon as possible. I check the email and D2L as much as I can, but there are times I might miss you. So definitely, if you need me, I'll be on my way. No problem. The big journal entry last week was what is history? And like I said, I wanted to hear your parts first. So here's mine. History is a story. History is like a giant chapter book. Each era, each uh human, each hero, each villain, each story is its own chapter, it's its own page, it's its own section of this giant book we call history. History is a lesson. History is something amazing. History is what we see and learn from each and every day. History is events of the past being like more like before now. Now, sometimes when I talk about with my middle schoolers, it's like seconds before now. Is it hours, days, months, years? That's up to you. I say history is those amazing things that have happened that shape us to be what we are. And like I said, when I read a storybook or when I watch a movie, those stories that I love so much, they teach us lessons. They show us what can be, what has been, what should be, what almost was. And so history is very, very special to me. And when we start about history, that's where this week comes in. I know, 2 chapters you have to read this week. That's the goal for it. And that's a lot. I get it. But you can read it pretty quick. I did. And it's the starting point. So these civilizations are pretty cool. So going all the way back to the beginning, humans started in Africa. That's the most evidence, the most research, the most scientific, historical facts that we have is right around there, somewhere in this red, is where the Homo sapiens, the human beings that we kind of are today, started. And from there, they spread out. Now, how did we get to Australia? How do we get to North America? How do we get across these big, vast waters? Well, climates were different. There was ice ages. There was rising sea levels, lowering sea levels. Just over the course of the history, the Earth has changed and shifted a little bit here and there. And so the evolution has always pushed us to what is be today. So to say that we haven't learned anything in the last X amount of years is kind of funny because humans have changed a whole bunch since we first started. We've learned so much. Like I'm coming to you live on the internet, right? Talking to parents, grandparents. This was never an option, and that's only a little bit ago. So we're talking about years and years, millennia ago. Oh my goodness, we have changed. Started off as hunters and gatherers. Now, if you're like me, I'm a terrible shot. So if I was a hunter at the time, we would have been starving. Gathering, well, I'm terrible at identifying flowers, berries, leaves. So we might have eaten something poisonous. So good thing I'm not in charge of hunting and gathering in today's world. But that's what they did. They followed the food, nomadic lifestyles. They had to use all the material they could find to build like they were minimalists, the least amount. Now, anyone who knows me, I like stuff. I like showcasing all the little trinkets that I've collected over the years. I like stuff on my walls. I like to have things to look at. So that would have been hard, but at that time, you're constantly moving. So you just like get rid of junk. No hoarders back in the hunter and gatherer days. Made tools out of rocks and bones, and they had the small groups of like 15-ish people, which makes a lot of sense. If you have small groups, It's easier to feed, easier to delegate jobs, and you don't have to feed many people. And that's where we see that big shift into everything, is because early on it was small groups because they only could feed that amount of people. If you can feed 15, your group was 15. If you can feed 5, your group was 5. And that it was based on the food instead of what you wanted. Like today, we have towns of millions upon millions of people because the food can come. They can hold that much. Now, is it very crowded? Is it very dense? Yes. But at least they were able to hold it at the times. And so that's why those hunter and gatherer groups are so small, is because the food just wasn't readily available, and that's all they could feed. And that lifestyle changed with probably the greatest development in human history, because agriculture, raising of animals, growing crops, having food there for you, has allowed everything else to take place. And here's why. Now you're no longer running after food. You can sit back, relax, and go, oh, well, now I want to do this a little better. Now I want to do that a little better. And that's what allowed that evolution, that growth to take place, is because the food was right there and you weren't constantly hungry. You weren't constantly wondering where the next meal was going to be. Now, I'm not saying right away when the Mesopotamia starts, we'll talk about that in a little bit, that everything was perfect and fine and grow. No, we still have hungry people today. But at least at that time, once agriculture took place and was created, now all of a sudden people are like, wait a second, we're not chasing after food. We can make our house a little better. Oh, now we can make this a little better. I don't really want to do all those mundane chores, so let's build this to do it. And that's why I always say agriculture is probably one of the biggest advancements for human history. And it took place right here in this green little crescent, as you can see, crescent moon, fertile crescent. That's what we call it. Fertile being able to grow a lot of crops. And that is Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia meaning land between two rivers. One of the very first cities, was that major achievement. Now we have a city of thousands of people hanging out together going, wait, we don't have to run after food. Are you hungry? No, we got food right here. Go to the market, trade with the farmers. And so the Fertile Crescent is called that because farming could take place easily. Look at all these rivers in there. Yes, when you think of the Middle East today, you're probably thinking about deserts and mountains, but right there in the middle, there was that nice, safe, protected area that allowed crops, animals to just flourish. And that is why all the perfect scenarios brought it together. When we're looking at Mesopotamia, writing, cuneiform, they invented writing. So while I say agriculture is one of the best for human history, the best invention for history or historians is writing. Now people are putting their thoughts onto paper, and we're able to see what they thought, what they saw, how they analyzed stuff, and going from there. One day they might look at my notes a long time ago and see, oh, this is what he found important. This is what Mr. Langle saw as the key pieces of information. And so that's where Mesopotamia really comes into play, because they finally wrote things down. And then they started big, giant ziggurats. So you can see right in here, Mesopotamia right there, right there, Uruk right there, Sumer, and then the ziggurats, this giant temple. All right, folks, that's not a little like 10-foot thing. That is giant, huge in the fact that they're starting to build up, out and up, and people are reaching to the skies. Ziggurats are temples for the gods, so the closer you got to the gods, up into the heavens, the closer they could hear your prayers and all that stuff. So those ziggurats were major inventions. That first above ground, that first giant house type of thing. The Akkadians grow as the empire. So Sargon, of Arcadia, was that first empire to take place. And the difference between like first cities versus empire, Sargon took over all the area. He started to see, oh, I want this, I want that. And that's when human nature of greed kind of really takes place. He had his city of Acadia, and then they went out and got more. And he started to expand. And when you expand, if you bring in different ideas and blend them together, next thing you know, you're really cooking with oil, because you're learning new things, you're building upon things, you're making things better, and you're starting to trade, and it's becoming huge. In the Fertile Crescent, farming was focused on labor, understanding of the different chores. The religion started to grow with it too. You needed the gods to be nice so you can have good crops, that reliable food source. And that's what allows the Akkadians to go off and conquer. Now, the Akkadian Empire only lasted for like 150 years. Long time, but in the grand scheme of things, that's very short. Something that kind of added to the whole idea of the area is right here, the Code of Hammurabi. The Code of Hammurabi is groundbreaking. I probably used that word a lot, and it's not been that long for this video. But when it's the first, like, that's the thing. We're talking about the first civilization, Mesopotamia. So all this stuff is brand new and amazing. And for the Code of Hammurabi, it was an if-then statements. If you do this, then you do that. Like, it was plain Jane. You knew exactly what was going to happen. And better yet, you actually knew what was going to happen. Because before then, the king, the emperor, could just make up rules on the spot. Here, Hammurabi actually wrote them down, so he could still change them. He could still say, hey, nope, not allowed there. Here we go. This is the new rule. But he actually had to sit back, analyze, and go through a process instead of just the fact that, nope, snap fingers, this is the new law. So the Code of Hammurabi kept everyone accountable. Not very equal, very, very harsh, but it was that first step into having laws written down so everyone knew what was going on, and everyone was able to really take forth that idea. So after Mesopotamia, people are expanding, people are growing, people are thinking, and it comes to these two civilizations right here. The one down on here, the bottom one, is the Indus River Valley. Indus River being that river right there, and then because it took place in the valley, it's the Indus River Valley. Now, not a lot is known about this area. It's like in the jungles of India. It rose up, did great, then kind of just dried up and disappeared. We didn't know about it for a long, long time. In fact, we found out about it more from Mesopotamia, because they would write about this civilization, the Harappa, over to, let's see here, their east, where they're not 100% sure what's going on there. Through trade, through ideas, we were able to piece it together. And then we were able to find some ruins and buildings in those jungly areas. The cities were well planned. You got, like, if we're building a new city, hire their city managers. Everything was on that grid. Everything had its place. Everything flowed perfectly. It was very well thought out. It wasn't just rumble jumbled together. So even though they were right now, where there's the big debate in history, is it the Indus River Valley or Mesopotamia is the oldest civilization? I still go with Mesopotamia because we haven't had definitive proof to say otherwise. So I would say Indus River Valley is the second oldest, or 1A for the oldest. And it really allows you to see that even though it was so old, they had indoor plumbing, stuff that the Middle Ages didn't even have. They had rubber duckies. Yeah, they actually found old, not actual rubber duckies, but like different toys carved for their baths and all that stuff. So Indus River Valley is just kind of like Mesopotamia, a lot of new, quick, fun hits. Not too much is known about those two, or the third one we'll talk about, but the ideas are growing and everything is getting better and really expanding on it. And the final one is Egypt. Today, when I say Egypt, you probably think of the Sahara Desert, sandy, hot, nothing grows there. Well, a long time ago, when Egypt first started, it was lush grasslands. It actually fed the world. That's why when you see Greece and Rome later on, they had their big area they had to take was Egypt, because they needed to feed their people, and Egypt was the breadbasket. They're the ones who could feed everybody and grow everything. And just slowly over time, due to the desert expanding, that's what you see today. The Nile River is that lifeline. Without the Nile River, it doesn't exist. It is still a desert, so there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But it separated the city-states and moved everything around to allow it to grow. When Egypt started, it was on its own, no real unity in the nation until 3000-ish, when they all came together. It was big unification. Pharaoh took over. Pharaoh is a word we found later on, and it means big house, great house, something like that along those lines, because the king has the greatest house lineage. And we're not talking about the physical house, but the idea of the family, the house, and they rule because the gods of Egypt said so. Like I just said, Egypt is very, very religious. The gods controlled everything, and the pharaoh was seen as a god on earth. So the idea of that growth was just going more and more and more. They wrote in hieroglyphics, so pictographs. Thanks to the Rosetta Stone, we can actually read most of those hieroglyphs. But for a lot of history, we couldn't read it. So we were just trying to wonder, what does all this mean? They carved it into the stone. They wrote it on the papyrus. It's kind of like a reed plant paper. And they expanded and expanded and expanded. Egypt is broken down into 3 different kingdoms. So that's the old kingdom, that first one. That's when all these pyramids were built. The very first one, Amenhotep with the pharaoh Dozier, Djoser, actually built the first step pyramid. Then we go to the bent pyramid and the red pyramid and the big giant pyramids. I always like looking at the bent pyramid because you can physically see how it's going one way, then clearly they changed plans because the architect made a major mistake about the weight and heaviness of the pyramid. So just imagine the pharaoh who like sees himself as a god, all of a sudden is like, wait a second, you're screwing up my tomb. You're screwing up the place where I'm going to bury myself and live for the afterlife and forever and ever in their religion. And that architect probably was terrified of that pharaoh because he made a major mistake and the pharaoh could have him killed just like that. So with that fits, they go on to some others, and finally they got the giant pyramid of Giza with Emperor Khufu right there. So the giant pyramid of Khufu, the giant pyramid of Giza, either one, whichever one you call it, did not start overnight. It was a lot of trial and error up to that point. Then they kind of fall apart. Like the pyramids are stupid expensive, like billions of dollars. And so they kind of run out of money, they get invaded, and they kind of die off. Then the Middle Kingdom rises. The temples are being built. That's where Ramses comes in. That's where Akhenaten changes the polytheistic to monotheistic, and a lot of stuff happening in that Middle Kingdom, rising back to the power. No pyramids are built after the Old Kingdom, but temples are starting to be shown there. And finally, they kind of go back down. The second intermittent time period, once again, outside invasions. Egypt's still there, but it's not Egypt. And it leads us to the New Kingdom, final big hurrah. And that kind of ends with Alexander's conquering, ends with Rome taking it over, and Egypt just never kind of recovered from it. So these 3 civilizations, Mesopotamia, Indus River Valley, and Egypt, are the beginning parts. You can see, definitely, I say do more research, dig into it, look at the stuff they built. It's like, holy cow, how did these people with like the simplest tools possible make these amazing things? Well, religious aspects, hard work, and then just being dedicated to that one leader who wasn't going to take no for an answer. So all that amazing stuff took place thousands of years ago. And we'll keep going from there. So the story we read here is humans are capable of amazing things. The story that these early civilizations say is a lot of hard work pays off. Worked so hard that thousands of years later, they think aliens built it. So you have some questions to answer in this week's discussion post. I definitely hope you take advantage of the discussion post and make it a really good one. You have that discussion that we can't have in class. Then you have the quiz, 10 simple points. As you can see, quizzes are a lot less than the discussion post. The discussion, I'm looking for that college answer, that pull out, really tell me what you're thinking of, what's going on in your brains. Hopefully everything made sense. Hopefully you're watching this on Monday. So you won't have grades on last week's stuff until later on Monday. I kind of give, like, Sunday is that day to wrap up. Monday, earliest I can, I'll grade it, put the grades in, and we'll go from there. I don't have any worries or concerns. If you do, reach out to me. I am more than happy to help. That's what I'm here for. And so, early humans, earliest civilizations, have fun. Good luck.